Yes.
Okay. I think you should see my screen correctly with the slides.
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So I think we can get started, and I would like to say again, thank you, Carmen, for the coordination. I would like to first introduce myself and then leave to Luca and then go through the agenda. So I'm based in Berlin. I work as a civil designer, and I'm here as a community system-making contributor from Platform Design Toolkit. So I'm joined this community as early adopter roughly 1 year ago in March to support the new white paper that the team was working. And as a result of this, they also revamped the tools. So by getting involved in this community, I also delivered in a final event in July, an event about the decision-making process in governance settings with Common Stack. Might be familiar to you. So we experimented from democratic to quadratic conviction voting. And this is part of my ongoing project about blockchain civic design. So as a community of practice in Platform Design Toolkit, I could keep developing and exchanging insights with our innovators. And I'm here because I believe this will be very valuable for your entrepreneurial awareness, for your organizational cultural traits, and your strategic tools. So plus, we will generate some good relationship and dialogue. And so I would suggest us to start from a place of curiosity. So I will now leave to Luca, and then I'll go through the agenda. And I'm happy to have here Luca with us as a co-founder. So it's very, very important. And thank you for being
Thanks, Renzo, and nice to meet you. Nice to meet you all. I'm Luca. Background as an engineer. I'm based in Rome currently. So I'm start contributing to Platform Design Toolkit since 2013. And what we did over years is to create this series of toolkits and frameworks that you can use to develop your own platform strategy, and you can shape your activity by leveraging the principles of platform thinking that, as you will see in a moment, are very, I would say, effective and powerful. And it's what we did and releasing Creative Commons are very powerful and really validated approaches that a lot of companies nowadays can use to shape their initiatives. So you will see that we will put a lot of stuff in this presentation, so we hope not to maybe put too much pressure on you, but we want really to give you an overview of what you can maybe think also independently from us and on your own by adopting these kind of toolkits. Just an important thing worth mentioning before we start, coming to the reason why we are also interested into the blockchain and the DLT world, is that we just released in November 2020 this white paper that Renzo was mentioning. And in the white paper, we studied the adoption of several platform trends into current industries and what's the impact of these elements and this thinking into those industries, including the emerging techs. So there is one chapter, maybe I can invite you to read chapter number 4 of the white paper, where we studied the impact starting from a platform thinking value chain perspective of distributed ledgers and AI and some other disruptive techs or changing techs in the world. So thanks again for inviting us. I'll give back the floor to Renzo for starting.
Okay, thanks, Luca. So agenda for today. I think I will go through myself through insight from the white paper, and then I will mention and guide you through the principle of platform design, the engine, phases, and then we'll have this very short interactive feedback at the end of the first part, when I will ask you just 2-3 questions that might trigger other questions that you might ask us. And the same when Luca will take the floor to go through some other elements of the platform design toolkit, landscapes such as the digital triangle, the MVP validation, growth and networking effect that might be actually relevant for the state that you are going through at the moment in your projects. And the same interactive feedback. And then we'll finish with the Q&A. So we should be able to wrap up in 1 hour or a bit more than 1 hour from now. So I would suggest if you have any questions, you can type in the chat, but I think in half an hour less, you will have this interactive feedback. So why platforms? why now. I think I will just connect with what Luca was saying about the white paper. In the white paper, there are basically elements that will explain why platform economy is relevant now. So because of the opportunities that exist for platform thinking, as the markets become more complex, more unpredictable, heavily regulated, and investment intensive. Also, because of the ways organizations can keep or gain a central position in business ecosystem, and the challenges to embrace governance models that ensure whole system development. Also, our scalable strategies are essential now to engage with new socioeconomic trends and global risk factors that characterize in these unpredictable times. And again, as Luca mentioned, these new emerging technologies such as blockchain, machine learning, AI, 5G, and cloud computing are now opening, I think, new possibility to mobilize and connect the ecosystem. And eventually how these boundaries and the shape of a traditional organization are now blurring into interconnected and distributed ecosystem. So this is where I think I would like to draw your attention from this research compass. That basically this is, I think, the center point in the white paper, but it's also that inspire what we're going through today. So this picture frame a dynamic framework, just an evolving background that allow to zoom in and zoom out on various aspects. So on the outside circle, you can see, I think, the evolutionary context drivers in which trends, I think, play out. So we are our evolving technologies, so the ever-threatened biosphere, and our revolving and almost indecipherable non-sphere in terms of how our culture and governance is on the way to just changing dramatically. In the middle, you can see where these contexts, coalitions are continuously organizing. So this, I think, can suggest an approach of how the organizational design navigates in the 21st century. So, and the white paper pivots on these four themes as a market pervasivity, means the impact of the market adaptability and the consequence of unbundling of the firm. So need to retooling themselves constantly. The new governance spectrum, so the hyper-local scale that we all been witnessing how the local communities are basically revamping themselves to make a point how to connect with the global level. And eventually the sense-making process. So these four drivers, I think, take place in this background. You can see no more, no yet, meaning that I think we all know that we are about to see what is coming. So in the sense of the trust, how a system of trust through decentralization with blockchain, token economics, prompt to a different paradigm of collaboration, more with nature rather than extracting value. So, and on the other side, no more. So the bureaucratic systems limit does not match anymore with the ambiguity and complexity. I think that they need a sort of collaboration. And there are examples about this. You can think of how in France, I think they needed a collaboration from a platform to deliver masks all over the country. And there was a very good example of how private platform enable, I think, a government to deliver a widespread value. So, and this goes on the, I think, on the view from above in terms of how we are going through from an industrial age where the pipeline with the potential and the mass market we control to a platform age, from network with its effect, network effect, and a spatial expectation with mass participation. And again, here you can see how more from an analytical perspective, how from an industrial organization, you can see economies of scale, one size fits all, to platform organization, where there is a continuous personalization, long tails, more about the scope. In terms of targets, we see consumers. We saw consumers in industrial organization, and platform organization trigger more an ecosystemic approach with producer and consumers and their interactions. In terms of wants, in industrial organization, we have provide solution to problems, but with platform economy, we empower a potential that is unexpressed. In terms of what provides an industrial organization is product and services for consumption, but on the other hand, with the platforms, we have the services that support the participants in serving each other continuously and helps them to learn, improve, and to grow. So this introduced, I think we can say, two vantage points. One is potential is growing at the edge of the ecosystem, and on the other end, we have everybody wants something special. And I think you might have heard this, I think, concept from Marshall McLuhan. So we shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. So this means that we live in an era where what is culturally desirable is technically possible. And therefore, we look at platforms, they're not just technologies. Actually, they are scalable collaboration agreements. So platforms are not products, but they are a mindset and a strategy that enable a continuous collaborative approach based on interaction. So, and also there is a shift in terms of how we perceive value. So this new element bring to us a new way to deal with supporting value streams. So while in the industrial model, we have this linear approach, we know that now this value is coming from anywhere. So the peer-to-peer approach is basically create a different model to capture this value or part of this value. So in terms of what are platforms? I think there are quite a few interesting definition that I think from John Hagel here in terms of the governance. So the governance structure determines who can participate, what roles they might play, how they might interact, how disputes get resolved, an additional set of protocols or standards to facilitate connection, coordination, and collaboration. So in other words, so platform is something that enable play and generate this sort of context where there is a continuous interaction where the value stream happens. This one from Sanjit Chudari. By the way, there is very interesting open source content on the Platform Design Toolkit where I've been keep learning about this. And I think I really like from one of the last podcasts, I think he mentioned the definition of platform design as business models that create basically value by connecting multiple sites, harnessing those interactions. So you can see here the importance of infrastructure enabling entities participating in a company business models. Another one here is more about the story, the narrative, an effort to broadly redefine terms and competition for the market sector through a positive, galvanizing message that promises benefits to all who adopt the new terms. So here is the importance of a narrative of positive transformation that actually will have to populate your value proposition. And this combination of narrative in your value proposition is a pool that enables a shared context and tools that eventually in the platform strategies will foster and leverage the channels that actually we will comment through soon. So what are the principles? The principle as we're going through now is basically what will be I think useful for you, for your product, for your service, but also for your evolving process as also as a professionals. So these also actually are the base on which the tools is being developed. I think the first principle is recognize the potential that grows at the edge. So I think here you can see how, I think let's take an example. So Apple didn't hire app developers, but helped them to distribute their potential, their impact. Another example is OpenDesk. So this platform does not build furniture, but the fabricators are mobilized locally. So the idea of recognizing those small entities have an increasing potential to impact their own life, create products and services. And on this, there is a reflection of the idea of designing for pool. So imagine that the platform needs to reach that really very small acquisition cost versus the user growth that inherently will enable the network effect in the platform strategy. So there is this idea of a pull versus push, and the platform shapers, you, should carefully design this value-driven platform that able to trigger this effect. So you don't sell basically the platform to your ecosystem. So therefore, you need to so the important step here is to really understand what motivates within your ecosystem your entities. So resonating with their existing context, understanding the multi-sided value proposition of your platform strategies. So the platform strategies must help these entities in the ecosystem to leverage their own potential, to respond to the pressure in achieving goals, and providing them sensible experience gains. The second principle is design for emergence. So design for emergence means that designing for an ecosystem that doesn't exist basically is like designing a solution for a problem that nobody has. So I think nobody will do that. So the idea is the focus on the ecosystem where your strategies can be unearthed. So if you imagine that actually from the short-term rental market existed for ages, so before Airbnb, but was clumsy, was complicated, was very the reputation was very hard to leverage. But designing for this ecosystem helped Airbnb to thrive and to scale up. That wouldn't be otherwise possible. So I think here you can see how the importance from the inside out strategies. So never start from your capabilities, but look from outside. So the ecosystem is basically the container of your strategy. Moving forward on the idea of use self-organization to provide mass customization. So what does it mean here? So I think platform enable entities to generate solution. So platform itself is not the solution. You as a platform shaper enable self-organization that provides solution. So as consumers or members, we can call it today communities, demand personalized solution to specific custom contextual expectation, you need to enable this mass customization that industrially is not possible. So this can be achieved by helping entities in the ecosystem to self-organize around their potential the producer could match with the expectation of consumers. So again, the Airbnb example, so they let producer and consumers, let's say, so the host and the travelers figure out the check-in and check-out, breakfast and furniture. And on that, they kept building those experiences. So the reflection here is to then design to reduce the transaction cost. And one of the key, I think, tasks, the vision is from the platform designer perspective to reduce costs that enable larger markets, and lower cost of transaction means enabling smaller niches. I think there is also another reflection. So we all know about the approach of human-centered design, which is, let's say, focused on this idea of designing the personas or the archetypes. But this actually is designed for who's supposed to fit in the potential product and service solution. So instead, the idea of enabling relationship, this is the scalable journey that will definitely create a broadened conversation with entities that might not fit directly, but from the solution, this invitation and conversation will then create this value chain that we will explore further. So the fourth principle is about enabling continuous learning in this, I think here the vulnerability, uncertainty that we live here. So here is about creating this learning needs to happen in a competitive as much as collaborative with continuous mentoring and tutoring. So I think the fifth principle here is also to consider it's the design for disobedience. And I think you can consider this principle as innovating upwards with this holistic vision, trying to be, I think, one of the hubs of new ecologies of value. And I think you can think of APIs or microservices. So the APIs must be channels, but allowing interaction between parties, not just with you. And again, the platform designer need to let the players play at the edge of these rules. And you could capture these new emergent behaviors that appears as a recurrent, and then as a platform shapers, you need to make it add as a feature to institutionalize this. And again, a very recurrent example that we all know about Airbnb that keeps observing this experience, where I think there are patterns where you can see this continued integration of additional experiences that, from the traveler experience on top of the room rentals and so forth. So the key takeaway for another principle is the design for interconnectedness. So if you consider like when you stop producing solution and start designing a way to organize interaction in a large scale system, this means to embrace the concept of relationship, interaction between peers as a key element of the business. Another example, if you look at eBay, so the online mediation service that ensure basically the disputes between the buyers and the sellers are basically set in a way that is perceived fair for the parties. This increases the willingness to trade, trust. And the final one is the platform design principle about to let go the identity with the whole. And here is about, I think, losing in a way control in terms of the platform companies identify themselves with a community. I think it's quite relevant and important. I think we can see now that, okay, they might be for profit, but for example, Apple is a community driven. So there is also another example, if you think about Patagonia. Patagonia is inseparable from its environmental advocacy. So, there is a couple of initiatives from an advertising perspective, don't buy this product, if you remember. It might sound cheeky, but again, they're trying to really integrate their vision with how the community is actually moving forward to a certain approach towards economy. Another, I think, initiative for Patagonia was a Wear a Wagon 2015. So this initiative to go around to repair basically clothing with this mobile repair shop. So I think, again, these are very important to consider how you try to merge with the community without, I think, pushing your brand identity as the principal, the main focus. So in terms of these key points that I think we would like to share with you is also the design principle are also linked with your context as a blockchain or distributed ledger technologies. So there are design breakthrough in crypto technology. They increase the capability to design function. They connect both financial and governance incentives to dynamics in participation, investment, collaboration. So there is also the example of the DAOs, and I think they are maturing components that are taking more place in distributed technologies. One example is augmented bonding curve, for example. But coming to the idea of a platform, so we consider a platform not as technology, it's more about a point of view, an approach on a strategy that's very important to understand, to mobilize and support an ecosystem in creating value with the aim of capturing this value, part of this value. Again, as you see here, this combination of narrative, technology, routes and channels, and context. So all this principle, basically, if you look in the context of the journey, so this is where I think the platform design toolkit or the platform thinking is based on these four main phases, within which there are basically tools that you can apply. It's open source. I think there are quite like relevant number here, how many organization that developed this. Also as myself as a professional just coming out from the bootcamp. So these canvas are very impactful to frame and reframe your thinking about your strategy. So speaking of which, I think the idea of a strategy design that I want to address before leaving to Luca leave the floor to Luca, is about the two core engines that basically, as you, as a platform shapers, need to consider to enable this value creation. One is the transaction engine and the learning engine. So these two pillars are, I think, the focus of the strategy. So the transaction engine is more, let's say, marketplace, relational engine. And the learning engine is more generating, fostering this internal growth engine for entities, helping them becoming their best version and pulling them on the platform. So let's start from the transaction engine. So I think there is a growing need for interaction at the edge of ecosystem, calling for continuously reducing friction. You know, if you think about, we did this with technologies. So websites replaced shops, smartphones replaced landlines, cloud computing replaced data centers. So a process start to reducing this friction through the elimination also of unnecessary middlemen. And we know that blockchain and smart contract, these are about this very shift. So the organizational dynamics are turning their focus more towards reducing ecosystem risk rather than single risk. So I think a race to reduce transaction costs is also to embrace more adaptation. So learn to adapt as a systemic feature. So what happens in complexity-driven ecosystem is that the value is not easy to define. Therefore, organizations need to create interaction. It's not just about creating a customer, like Peter Drucker used to say, but it's more about creating this concept of value chain is marking the time. So I think we can go on the learning engine as what is match the transaction in terms of creating a very fundamental engine of growth. Not only success story drive more interest and participation, but it's more about, I think, creating skilled participants, skilled member in your ecosystem. They're able to basically hold the biggest stake in the common, I think, in the common platform and care about its evolution and governance. So you can think of like a 3 steps, you know, in your platform. So the onboarding platform, where you really understand how platform works as a member, assessing the gaps, using the platform, start transacting, and then getting better on the platform. So what is a competitive edge with learning new skills, consolidated skills? Imagine Airbnb, you know, often the path from traveler to host, becoming super host, and with additional services and opportunities, and eventually capturing new challenges to user, so the acquired capabilities to align personal interest and drivers. So finally, these are basically the tools that will enable you to mapping existing experiences, patterns, assets. So from mapping ecosystem, portray entities, analyzing their potential to exchange value amongst them, reducing the cost, and then creating engine of learning and converging to a clear experience. So, so before leaving the floor to Luca, I would like to share with you, I think, one way to interact now from your also state in your activities. So if you go kindly to this website, www.menti.com, and then you can use this link, 3678905, and I will invite you then to, you should have in front of you the first question. What does platform thinking means to you? I assume if I'm looking at everyone here, I will stop sharing the screen for now. I would like just to ask you to answer this question, and I will give you just 1 minute. Just type completely what means to you platform thinking. And after 2 questions more, we open the floor So the code is 3678905. Thank you, Carmen. So the next, I'll pass into the next question. So if you look at your journey of your projects, where are you? Are you in the exploration phase, design phase, validation, prototyping, and growth? I'll give you another minute to answer to this question. I think roughly 10 of you answered. I will wait another 30 seconds. Okay, we have 4 in validation prototyping, 3 in design exploration, and 2 in growth. So the next and the last one is, what tools do you use to approach your platform development strategies? So this is an open question to ask you, how do I approach this? Whatever is your toolkit or your approach, your sorts, we would like to have this to then trigger a very short conversation before leaving the floor to Luca. So I'll give you 1 minute to openly brainstorm and share what are your approach and development strategies. Okay, so one already shared the answer. Just want to give another 30 seconds. Okay, as I'm conscious of time now, before leaving the floor to Luca, I would like to ask you if, okay, some more answers coming in. I would like to ask you if you have any questions at this point of what I shared so far. Again, as I'm conscious of time, if there are burning questions, 1 or 2 that you want to share, we're happy to answer. Otherwise, I will just leave the floor to Luca. So you can open the mic or share in the chat. If it doesn't come now, we'll address later in a Q&A. Okay, so, okay, thank you, Mitsuko. At this point, probably I leave the floor to Luca, and I'm available in the chat if you want to share any other questions. I will keep the flow on the questions there. I'm happy to answer in the chat if I can. Otherwise, we'll leave to the Q&A, and I'll leave to Luca now.
Thanks, Enzo. Thanks, Enzo. So I'm sharing my screen for the second part. Please allow me just a couple of seconds to do that. Okay, I think it's good now. You see it.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and also I prefer to watch you. I really don't like the way Zoom rearranges the interface when you start sharing. Okay.
Yes, I agree.
So So I mean, Renzo explained. It started from the middle of the process. No, so just to reframe this a little bit from the broader perspective, what we are telling you is that this methodology, the methodologies, because it's a family of methodologies, can be used at any stage, at any level of your activity and your designing of your strategy and your product or your service or your solution in general, according to the platform thinking mindset. So we start from the strategy design because it's the core part. It's typically iterative. You design, you validate, you make the prototype, an MVP, you validate it again, and then these are giving you more inputs and elements for a new design iteration and so on. And I also think that you will be more focused on this phase and in the next one, no? So the validation, prototyping, and the growth, given that, of course, you already have your solutions that have been approved by I mean, in this Blackpool container. But sometimes when you do the design, you realize that typically you need to step back a little and start reanalyzing the entire value chain, the entire industry, the entire context, because you might have a solution or a product, and you may want to find other areas, other contexts, other verticals where your solution does really make sense and can be, so you can widen the perspective and for instance, apply it to adjacent cases, adjacent contexts, or other business arenas. So that's why in the development on this mindset and platform thinking, we also took the chance to develop the initial part. So what we call strategic awareness and exploration. And how we do that? We have created so far, starting from analyzing successful cases and best practices from successful platforms. Then in the past years, we derived what we call the unified market theory, and how these and how digital markets in particular, but this can be applicable also to real life experiences, can be divided into layers that are named according to our theory, the infrastructural layer, the aggregators, and the long tail markets or niches. So our main point here in the design is that you typically have in an ecosystem the infrastructural side that is made up of components and modules and commodities in general that can be used by niche player to create value. And these niches, these long tail players, these long tail markets made up of entities that are exchanging value, so producers of value and consumers of value, are trying to compose and pick those modules and elements by themselves in order to try to create value or to generate more value. The problem is, or the opportunity on our side, is that typically this activity is very hard to be done. It's very hard to be accomplished because the potential in an ecosystem could be hidden in terms of assets that are not utilized or capabilities that are not leveraged. And no one is helping these players to perform better. That's where that opens the space for platforms and aggregators. There is the middle layer, and if you're lucky, in your context, a platform that is playing the role of a dominant aggregator, trust advisor, and talent agent is not existing yet. So you have opportunity to shape yourself into becoming an aggregator and helping the ecosystem to develop and leverage more value. Why it's so important that we focus on becoming an aggregator? Because typically aggregators, they pick up components from the infrastructural side, and then they are compose them in such a way that is autonomously, independently usable directly by the niche players, so producers of value and consumers of value. You remember what Renzo just told you, that an aggregator, a platform strategy, is not providing final solutions to the ecosystem, but is enabling producers of value and consumers of value to interact, define together the level of services, or the kind of solution that's acceptable for both, and then make this transition to happen. So that's what they do. And by doing this, they're definitely exploiting the benefits of network effects in terms of fast-growing, exponential growth, and we say exponential growth of value perceived by the users according to the number of users themselves that are using the solution. So you really want to become an aggregator because you have some advantages, I would say. First of all, you're not competing in the same arena of the economies of scale. So you're not providing a solution that will be sooner or later commoditized and so tending towards running at the basic cost of business. Vice versa, you can do the opposite. You can increase your marginality because leveraging on the network effects for attracting users and producers of value, your cost of acquisition of customers is decreasing over time. And so your marginality increases thanks together and thanks to the growth of the value that is perceived by the users themselves. So the good news that we discovered and that we found is that it's possible also to design this phase. So it's also to scan the ecosystem, looking for potential and opportunities, and then be prepared or prepare your strategy for exploiting this value. And how we do that? For instance, we use such tools like the Wordley maps, the value chain maps you're probably familiar with, because we found out that it could be very easy to map the 3 layers of our unified market theory into these Wordley map or value chain maps, as you want to call it. And then I would say the visual positive design approach that we are bringing here is that if you are mapping your ecosystem as it is today, let's give that if you're lucky, so if the fields of possibilities is still open to any potential actions of exploitation, if you're lucky enough, the value chain you are working on or you want to transform will be an industrial pipeline point of view based value chain. And what we found is that these value chains, they have a typical shape that is very similar to a C, like you see on the left part of my screen. What this implies, of course, a lot of things that you can consider in order to think about a better strategy. For instance, consumers are typically commoditized because no one cares really in those perspectives what a consumer really needs in terms of personalization and hidden potential, and the same for the producers of value. They're typically both commoditized and also very, very hidden in terms of value and visibility of value to the final users, because in the middle we have the traditional business process of any company, of corporation, that is hiding that value because they are building their additional value, their added value, because they are hiding who is really providing solutions and so on. The good perspective platform thinking brings in is that you can transform this value chain by applying the principle of platform thinking. And that means that you can reshape the value chain into a Z shape that also implies something more. For instance, producers and consumers, let me just go to this slide. You can reshape it by applying what we found out are the 6 major platform plays or platform strategy any successful platform business can apply. And you can reshape the traditional pipeline industrial value chain into envisioning the target platform thinking value chain. That implies, for instance, that you can bring back consumers and producers in a direct relationship that is helping both exchange value, build personalized solutions according to the respective needs and potential and capabilities. And then, of course, by doing this, you are enabling them to be autonomous and independent into using the standardized business process. It is another very important activity that platforms and aggregators do, because they reassemble the components coming from the infrastructural side, from the infrastructural layer, and then they present them so that they can be used directly by the final users without any intermediation, by providing transparent rules of interactions and governance and decision making. For instance, think about Airbnb. Airbnb at technological level, they didn't invent anything special. They just reassemble a CRM, an ERP, and a payment gateway in such a friendly way that also everyone that has no specific expertise in the computer science can easily upload some pictures, present a room, and describe the values of that space, and then start accepting bookings and payments and so on. autonomously, so without needing to be a computer science or a web developer and so on. And this enable a huge amount of value in the ecosystem, no? So typically the aggregators, they tend to do this. So the part that you see highlighted in light orange or light pink, as you prefer. So they typically standardize the transactions, that they prepare the business process in a SaaS way, so in a software as a service approach, so that you can ask directly your entities to use it. And then, of course, they manage the identity and reputation and trust engine. No? That is something that is, I would say that working in the direction of solving the trust problem in the ecosystem is one of the enablers, the most powerful enablers in the ecosystem, because platform, they're trying to aggregate resources and help people into the orienteering and selection of those resources. And so, of course, you can use trust as one of the main drivers in this matchmaking process. That is beneficial for everyone, because the higher the trust is and the higher the quality of transaction is, of course, because no one will try to cheat and perform at low level, no, because then they have the backfire of having a low reputation attitude. So we have a series of canvases and frameworks to do this, for instance, in case you want to explore the possibilities and explore these value chains, and for instance, find what's the sweet spot among all the possibilities you have in order to start refining and reshaping your strategy and your solution according to the real needs and values told you by the ecosystem itself. And we apply also these into, I would say, much broader context, given that maybe not for the current project you are working with, but typically you may fall in certain discussion where maybe it's hard to understand how and where you can apply your solution. So what's the right arena, what's the right industry that is, or what's the right part in this arena that could be much more beneficial for your solution. With this framework, you can, for instance, unbundle an ecosystem and finding the different arenas that are maybe resonating with the definition of Rita McGrath, Professor Rita McGrath, according to the jobs to be done. And these multiple arenas can be, again, scanned and unbundled into multiple value chains. And once you have these multiple value chains, you can make some evaluation according to your strategic interest, the total addressable market, or your assets and capabilities that you can leverage in the given value chain. And then you select what we call the platformization space. A platformization space is a space composed by multi-sided relationships. And based on our experience, according to our studies on the most successful platforms, we know that the most successful ones, they always and all focus on a single two-sided relationship in order to be successful, for a specific reason. Think that after you have done the analysis and then the design that Renzo explained to you, then you need to go through validation and prototyping and growth. What does this imply? Then that we told you that a platform shaper is not providing final solution to the ecosystem. It's providing a series of elements that are enabling producers of value and consumers of value to create solutions themselves, I would say, in their daily and peer relationships and exchange. So that means that when you have to build your strategy and to validate it and grow it and breed it, I would say, of course, you need to focus on some elements and you need to reduce complexity. That's why, for instance, it's not a very good idea to focus on multiple multi-sided relationships, because you risk to lose focus and to spend a lot of budget into validating different streams of value. That is sometimes is really unfeasible. So it's better to focus on a single two-sided relationship involving we say two sides of the value creation in the ecosystem, producing side and consuming side. So when you go for the validation of your approach, we are using here, for instance, the long tradition and bibliography of lean thinking and lean startup validation and prototyping. I'm sure that you're very familiar with Eric Ries or Steve Blank's approaches to validation and customer development. We didn't invent it again, so we use it, but in a different way, because you are not validating anymore just the single customer problem fit and the problem solution fit. In this case, we need to validate ecosystem potential fit. So understand if you identify correctly the ecosystem, and if in this ecosystem there is some hidden potential. There could be, for instance, not used capability, some skills that are not very nurtured, or maybe you have a lot of underutilized fixed assets. So assets that are already created, already there, already paid, but they are not exploited at 100%. And this is a huge pool of value you need to you want to exploit through a platform strategy, because since the asset is already paid, if you increase the usage of these assets, everything is added to the marginality, because you don't need to repay it; it's already repaid back. So that's why underutilized fixed assets are very important as one of the key enablers of a platform strategy. And then the second step is understanding if your solution, so if your platform, if your strategy is leveraging that potential. So that's the second step. And everything is based, for instance, on validating the risk assumption. What is the assumption that if not validated will challenge the entire, will jeopardize not the entire initiative that you design. But more than this, since you are setting up a two-sided relationship among producers of value and consumers of value, you really need to take into account what are the different types of network effects your initiative can start and can sustain and support in the mid and long term period, because this network effect is one of the engine of your growth, and one of the pull engine. We say one of the sides that's attracting entities from the producing side and from the consuming side. By definition, I know that you're familiar with the concept of network effect, but typically we have the direct network effect when the value is directly proportional or is exponentially proportional with the number of users using that platform, that solution that you're offering, that infrastructure that you're offering as well. The most common are the two-sided network effect, given that you have it every time that more users and buyers attracts more suppliers and developers, and this is increasing the value proposition, is improving the value proposition, and of course this is attracting more users, and the flywheel spins. But then, of course, you have also other reinforcing mechanisms that you may want to design. That's the other good news. You can design these reinforcing mechanisms and add in as many as you may want to add, because the more you add, the more defensible will be the value you create in terms of platform shaping and platform strategy. And you need to do that because you need to reach the critical mass with your initiative. Given that the critical mass in platform is typically defined as the ratio between producers and consumers of value. So you need to be very clear and aware of what the type of network effects you can generate and start with your platform initiative, because the types of network effects you want to set up influence the moment in time when you can reach the critical mass. And until you reach it, of course, you need to invest on the growth of your platform. Then once you have you match the critical mass threshold, then of course the growth becomes exponential and self-generating. So that's the optimal point. But to that point, of course, you need to invest. And of course, I mean, according to the different types of network effects you want to start, you can have maybe different approaches and different, I would say, time to reach it. So it's I would say it's very important that you evaluate carefully what you can accomplish with your strategy. This is just an example of the way we are using at visual level with a canvas to understand and design the type of network effects that you want to use. I don't know if you can read it, because I now realize it's very blurry, But we have on the left side, for instance, we have the different types and elements that can influence the network effect composition. For instance, how much your producers of value and consumers of value are differentiated or commoditized. What's the level of asymmetry in the system? So how many suppliers can serve how many consumers of value, or if your initiative is imagined and done at local level or a global level, or if you're in a single tenancy, multi-tenancy mode, how many, how frequent are the interactions between peers, producers and consumers of value, how much is the transaction value, and so on. And all these elements can influence this, the slope of the curve that is giving you ideas and I would say a target roadmap to reach critical mass. So, well, few elements, but we tried just to give you a 360 overview of the potentialities of applying platform thinking into your current businesses at all the stages, envisioning and design, and then validation and growth. We will, of course, share these slides with you. So I don't want to comment these links, but you can then access directly on your own, because we release everything that we do in Creative Commons. So you are free of use, of course, all the resources linked here. I'll give back the floor to Renzo. I mean, thanks for inviting us and listening to us. And now we have, I would say, a question time.
Yes, thanks, Luca. I think as we also apply the same approach on the first part, I think if you go back on the www.menti.com, we have 3 questions that we would like to listen you first. So I think in the chat, you have the code, and you can see, thanks, Luca. And the first question that I want to give you just a couple of minutes is to name the main 3 challenges to develop platform strategies. So just it's kind of a brainstorm, but reflection of what you heard and connect with your own current activities, projects. So I would like to we would like to understand, to listen first. So I'll give you just 1 minute or so to just jot down on this question the main 3 challenges that you have to develop a platform strategies, if you want to share. Yes, of course. This is the website, and I will
just put the code.
Oh, thanks. Some interesting insights coming up. I just want to give you 1 more minute, just in case anyone wants to add anything, and then we go on the other question. Okay, thank you for sharing. We have 5, 6 interesting points, even more. Okay, I'll go to the next question. In terms of priorities in your business strategies, can you please name the main 3 priorities in your strategies? again, here as for time fairness, I will just keep the time for another 1 minute or so, and then we have for the last question, and we open the floor. So we want to really understand where are you and how we can help, and how we can learn from each other. So please feel free to share your activities. Okay, last 30 seconds. Thanks a lot for sharing. I just want to share the last one. So what are the needs and hidden opportunities in your ecosystem? So this might be potentially tricky, but according to what you've done so far, your perception, your tools, your strategy that you mentioned before, can you just, again, go openly with the flow and share? I'll give you another 1 minute and a half so to share needs, opportunities in your ecosystem. Okay, last 45 seconds. Thanks. I think quite a few people shared. Okay, thank you very much for sharing, giving your input. I guess, again, as we are kind of on time, we want to give this 20 minutes for open questions for us. So please feel free to ask or share your feedback about what you learned so far, how that connects with your activities. Anyone?
Good morning. My name is Mieszko. Quick question. So what is do you see a difference between applying your tools between corporates and consultancies and startups? Because I think these are quite different environments in which, learning as organization also applies in a very different ways. Could you perhaps comment on that?
Yes, of course. If you want, I can start, Enzo, and then you.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
And then you complement. No, I would say our toolkits and the mindset we are transferring is pretty universal. Let me use this term. Then, of course, what is different are the implications or maybe the impacts. Okay. Let me just introduce some examples. So, starting from the perspective of principles, you can also apply platform thinking principle to your own activity as a consultant, as a freelance, as a person in general. But then you have a kind of road sign. So you can decide to apply the platform thinking to a project only or to an entire organization, or maybe to both. So you can run projects that are shaped as platforms, and then gradually you can shape your company, your organization, your activity as a platform. And this has some advantages now, because of course, if you are turning yourself into a platform as a company, as an organization, then you can be much more open and faster and be value driven and open to new opportunities and capture the unknown in the ecosystem, because this is something very powerful that platform approaches make. They are prepared, since they are not providing solutions to the punctual problems, they are opening the space, holding the space for entities to think about potential solutions that are maybe not designed, they are not designed up front. But having said so, the only difference if you apply this on existing large established hierarchical corporation or to startups is that the sooner you apply platform thinking, the better it is. And so my opinion is that if you apply platform thinking as a startup, that could be much better, because you design everything from scratch according to the platform thinking principles. And this gives you a lot of perks and values because you can be faster into detecting weak signals of potential in a market and providing very quickly solutions and so on. Of course, I mean, you can do it also in large organization, but time to go to the market and time to transform is longer. Just an example, Haier, probably you're familiar with Haier, no? It's the giant Chinese company producing appliances and white goods. Haier is pretty famous because it's one of the most successful cases of a platform company, and specifically of a company that transformed itself from a very hierarchical quite military organization of activities into a platform company. But they took 34 years in their case. They did it. They're successful. They're one of the most studied companies, platform companies in the world. For instance, our business school is publishing something like 80 different papers of research on Haier, but it took a lot of time. But now, for instance, they have a massive value in a general market, global market of white good appliances that is losing 5% every year. They, Haier only, could increase their revenues by 25% because they are a platform, just to give you an example. But then, of course, if you apply it from a clean situation as a startup, to my understanding, is better, because you can benefit from day zero to the benefits of platforms. I don't know if I gave you elements to.
Yeah, in some ways, I think you did. So thank you. And do you actually work with startups in implementing your strategies?
Also, we have, of course, I mean, we're a consulting company, so we go on with developing these tools and giving them in open source. But then, of course, we're always very, very happy to support businesses into the application of this. Of course, I mean, the level of intervention are different. For a startup, very smart, young, and flexible, and agile, probably it's enough that you join maybe one of our public events that are very accessible, and then you can bring your project and start designing it. And typically that's enough for a startup. For a large corporation, it takes more time, because you need to prepare this, to make an assessment of the initial conditions, start having a buy-in in terms of CXOs, executives, team leaders, and then once you have that, then you can start doing it. So it's longer and more expensive. But I mean, typically the frameworks are the same, and the way we apply them are totally the same, because they're pretty universal and agnostic. Then it's up to you to apply them to your specific context.
Probably in Mitsuko, I'd like to give you one more experience to next to what Luca was describing, more a larger scale. So in a couple of startups I worked with, it's kind of a faster process of experimentation. However, it's very crucial to create a strategic awareness. So meaning that you need to kind of bring it at speed, the team understanding the elements that will enable this collective experimentation. So, you know, typically probably in a big organization with silos, you need to find allies in the company to bring your project to a certain level. In a startup environment, I think you need to first really make sure that people follow the mindset you want to bring in, and that will create the sort of excitement of even eureka moment. They say, okay, now I'm into the picture and I can collaborate. That happened, I think, in the last startup I worked with, the B2B platform about sustainability transformation. The goal was to basically connect companies with a swarm of innovators that could basically encounter the platform to deliver potential solution, potential innovation program. I mean, they're still developing, but the starting point was understanding that you don't start from your own capabilities, but you look at the ecosystem, what actually are the needs, how consultants work in sustainability, for example. So I want to give you one more lens of this. There is anyone else that want to share question, insights, input? Or even your experience. I think here, I will share, by the way, the result for the Mentimeter with all of you. I think there are some good elements here that you share in your priorities strategy. So if you'd like to share anything that might help to deliver better your MVP to the market, or any question about the network effects, I think that's a good chance to learn, to make questions. Okay, see somebody opening the mic. Probably Mariola. No.
No, but I think Luis is speaking, is trying to speak, but we cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the headphones. If you disconnect them from the laptop, maybe sometimes. Because your microphone is on.
Okay.
It's fine to write the question and
yes.
Yeah, referring to critical mass, I guess. Okay, probably, Luca, we can bring the example from the bootcamp about the network effects linked to the critical mass.
Yes, let me.
Thank you for the question, Luis.
Thanks. Give me just a couple of seconds, because I mean, to properly go through the network effects thing now, we will take one day. That is typically the time we allocate in our platform design bootcamp. But I can give you some more elements, so that maybe they are catching your attention.
I guess the question is about the critical mass, how to reach a critical mass, Luis, correct? Okay.
Yes, maybe I can start from this one. Let me just share the screen. Oops. I mean, again, this interface is crazy. Okay. Well, so you're also watching the other slides that we typically use, no? So this is the context. So critical mass is generally speaking is the number of users you need to have into your system before this network effect starts. So before other users, they perceive this increased value because there are so many users in the platform, and then they are pulled automatically to the platform. Like, for instance, think about Facebook, no? What's the value of Facebook? The value of Facebook is because everyone is there, much more than the people you will never know in your entire life. And so you can find everyone there. Of course, a new social network with a very limited number of users is much less attractive. The same for, I would say, the concept of network effect started with the telco industry. Now, when they invented the telephone, of course, a telephone between two people has a very limited value. A phone system reaching everyone in the world has a much greater value. But having said so, no, in platforms, there are a particular, or say a general abstract case of network effects, because you're not thinking about a single cluster of users and adopters of your solution, like in the traditional user-centered approach for startup solutions. In this case, you have pools of producers of value and a pool of consumers of value. Also, if these consumers are other businesses, so I'm not referring about consumers in the consumeristic definition of them. It's just a consumer of value. So you have two sides, sorry. And so the chicken egg problem is that, of course, you need to grow one side to attract the other one, but until you don't have the other one, also the initial side is not attract. So you need to play tricks there. And one trick that is typically common in platforms is the so-called concept of liquidity. Liquidity is technically defined as the buyer to supplier ratio. So the ratio between who can produce value and who can purchase this value, you can consume this value. And then, for instance, now the different rates and the different liquidity values that are starting your network effects depends case by case. I can make you an example. Airbnb, they tested and validated this, and then now they know that until they don't reach 300 listed rooms in a city, that city is not attractive. So they know, for instance, by their experience. So you have limited tools to design this upfront. Most of cases you need either to validate and test it, or maybe to make a comparison with similar businesses and then try to understand what's their magic number for liquidity. But in their cases, until they don't reach 300 rooms and spaces listed in that city, a city is not attractive for Airbnb users and consumers. So, for instance, once that you know this, what you should do. In their cases, they paid their employees to travel into new cities in order to, I would say, subsidize the demand. No? So they were faking to be tourists in order to let hosts see that there was an increase in demand for rooms. And so by word of mouth or by advertisement, a lot of new suppliers were incentivized to publish their homes and their rooms onto that platform for that city until they reached 300 rooms. After that, they were sure by their experience that the network effect was starting, and they didn't need to sustain demand anymore. So this is in practice now what we do. I'm referring also to the concept of canonical unit. So the unit, I would say the KPI or the metrics that is relevant and applicable for you in order to understand if you are properly starting your network effects because you're reaching that critical mass. It could be, for instance, a categorization of value. It could be a niche, a cultural niche, a group of adopters, a geographically constrained niche, for instance. I make you just a quick example, and then I stop speaking. I don't want to use all the time. For instance, what's the problem of typically tech-driven business? That typically you start from the technology first, and then you don't pay enough attention to what are the real expectations in terms of value needed and perceived by the users in the ecosystem of your solution. As a consequence, you're developing maybe an amazing technology, but then no one is using it, and no one is adopting unless you spend money to push this adoption to them in terms of advertisement or incentives or discounts and so on. But this is an expensive war because you need to continuously pay for acquiring customers. If you properly design your platform, and when we design a platform, we always start from an emergent design, from the design of emergent value perceived by the entities, we try to do the opposite. So we try to provide them with a single user value, highly perceived value, and then the technology follows. Technology is always enabling them, is not driving. And in this case, now for instance, these kind of businesses. Here we mentioned Thumbtack, we mentioned Airbnb. They were very successful because they started from the ecosystem perspective, and then they follow up with the technology. So I'm not sure that I gave you enough elements in terms of an answer, but okay.
Thanks. I guess we have time for another question. I think Mitsuko shared something interesting in the chat. Agree. Yeah, actually, we mentioned this in a previous conversation with Luca as well.
Yeah, yes, I do agree with Bill Gates' statement, of course.
It's more like a digital marketing platform than anything else.
Yes, I mean, the case of Facebook is pretty peculiar, no? Because we consider it as a social network, but it's not a social network. It's a digital marketing platform. So it's a very efficient and good way to sell advertisements. Incidentally, no, they strongly rely on our side of producers of value because we provide our data. But I totally agree. So it's not one of the best example of platform I typically use in the consulting activities.
Probably, Luca, there is one more input from
deeper
Luis
into how to
that was
prioritize
interesting
arenas.
about, yeah, this connects probably with the entity portraits.
Yes, how we prioritize arenas. So, I mean, rather than prioritizing arenas, I would prefer to think about selecting the right arena and then unbundling it and find the platformization space. Given that, of course, the first thing to be done is understand where are the boundaries of an arena. And so, for instance, you can understand, how we do that. We typically start by mapping all the experiences that entities are having into the larger ecosystem. And then we cluster those experiences into arenas. Just an example, the definition of arena, I don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but it's resonating with the content, with the expression of what is the job to be done. A quick example. If I ask you maybe to name what are the competitors of Netflix, what do you think about? It's a real question, so it's not rhetoric.
I mean, YouTube.
I have an answer.
Okay, Amazon Prime, Amazon Video, Roku. Okay.
YouTube.
YouTube.
Classical cable.
Classical cable, yes, TV. And then what's more? Think, how can I say? Think laterally. What's the real? I would say, what's the real value Netflix is trying to attract and control from us, from the user, from the binge watchers, for instance? Pre-streaming, spare time, right? Who wrote it? Mitsuko, right? Spare time. Netflix is a very good way to. It's a way to entertain us in our spare time. So the arena of competitors of Netflix is not only strictly pertinent to alternatives to Netflix, streaming or TV in general, but it's per time. So it's competing with gyms, with having a walk, going out for a dinner, or no, reading a book. So whatever is giving us pleasure and leisure in our spare time. So you know now how, for instance, the arena is broader. And then, of course, in this broader definition of arena, you will have your assets, you will have your strategic interests, you will have your capabilities. So you can use these metrics as a filter to spot the right spotlight on the part of the arena you want to focus on. But then it's not enough, because also this part in the arena could be too broad for you to take action on. That's why we need to go through the value chain analysis and understanding how the value chain is composed, and then you focus on what is really valuable for you, because maybe it's what it's called low-hanging fruit. So it could be very high impact actions, but is for you it's very easy to be done because maybe you already have a capability to do that. You have already the technology. You already have the control of a certain cluster of users, for instance. And then with this continuous zoom in and zoom out, we guide you through the isolation of what we call platformization space. And then from there, you start with a design phase where you unbundle it in terms of entities, expectation of value. Like Renzo said, no, we do the entity role portrait analysis of needs and expectations, and then you bring them the two engines, so transaction engine, lower frictions and lower transaction cost, and then the learning path, the evolutionary path in terms of experiences. And then you're done, and then you can start implementing your MVP, so your minimum viable platform, as we call it. Okay, sorry for the very long story, not short.
I think we have the perfect time to leave the floor to Carmen. So we just like to say thank you very much for everybody to being here today. Feel free to reach out to Luca, to us, to me, and I will share the material later.
Thank you very much, Renzo, Luca. Right on time.